How's it going, guys? And welcome back to the long-awaited second episode of the podcast. It's been well over a year since the first one, but I got a little busy with work, school, and such. Uh, but since we're locked inside from Corona, when's a better time than now? Um, so it was supposed to be a weekly thing, switching from football to basketball, and my first one was a recap of not this season, but the season before. So yeah, it's been a while of the NFL season. Um, and this one's going to be football as well. It's going to be my personal mock draft. Uh, yeah, we'll start getting into a habit of doing it. I got a lot of free time now. Uh, so yeah, we're just going to jump right into it. With the first pick, it's very simple. It's going to be Joe Burrow, quarterback, LSU, going to the Cincinnati Bengals. I don't think I really need to go in depth here why this is the pick, but I'm going to anyways to kind of get it as lengthy as possible. The Bengals honestly aren't as poorly run organization as teams that you see like normally in the top five picks every year, like the Browns, Jaguars, Dolphins, teams like that. Um, do I think Joe Burrow is going to fix all of the problems of the Bengals? No, but it's one hell of a start. With the newer coach Zach Taylor, young guy, offensive mind, he's going to want to start with a quarterback as decent as I think Andy Dalton is. I think it's time to move on. Why not go with one of the best college quarterbacks of all time in Joe Burrow? Um, I think there's literally 0% chance that this is anybody else. And I expect Burrow to be around for a long time. I'm really high on Burrow. Probably not as high as some people. I think it's a lot closer with him and Tua than most people think, but I think he'll be around for a long time. He'll be a very solid NFL quarterback. Probably, not an MVP caliber, but I think he'll be a solid pro for a very long time. I think it's a very low risk, high reward pick, in my opinion. Number two, I have the Washington Redskins going with Chase Young, defensive end from the Ohio State. Again, it's not a very big shocker of a pick, but I'm trying to keep this kind of as realistic. I do have some shockers in here, but we'll get to that eventually. But here we're going Chase Young, my number one prospect in the entire draft. Just absolutely spectacular in all the facets of the game. I was really tempted to go Isaiah Simmons here, though. I'm probably higher on Isaiah Simmons than anybody else is. I think Chase Young is like right here, Simmons right below him. Simmons is just so versatile. He can play literally any position on defense. But Chase Young, I think, is just slightly more dominant, and that's why I'm going here for them, which giving them Chase Young add to that already amazing defensive line. The Redskins defense is going to be very scary for years. I went with excuse me. I know Washington has some bigger holes in the team than drafting another great defensive lineman, but sometimes when the talent level is like this distant, you take the best player over need. I think that's what some teams miss out on is they try to go for team need and then they miss out on the better players. Like if you look at the Patriots, yes, they're not having top 10 picks every year. They're in the later picks of the first round and such, but they go with best player available like no matter what, and that's why they've been dominant for the past 20 years. And I think some teams need to look into that. And there's no way you pass up on Chase Young here. Number three, I have a mock trade, which I do have those involved in here, where I have the Miami Dolphins trading up with Detroit. I don't have specifics to what I think the trade is going to be, but I do think Dolphins are going to trade up to 3 to get their quarterback, which will be Tua. I can even try to pronounce last name, but to a quarterback from Alabama. I think I'm really high on Tua. I think he'll be a solid pro. I don't think the hip is anything to worry about. He's just dominant in everything. Um, so I think the Dolphins have a lot of holes. But I'm super high on their new head coach Brian Flores, and as well as that Tua, I think is going to be spectacular. Not sure like I said, what all Detroit would get here from the trade. I think it will be a bidding war, so they're probably going to get quite a bit out of it. Um, But anyways, I think you have to make this move because some teams, like even like the Bears, they get hated on because of them trading up for Trubisky, which look bad in hindsight. But sometimes you just have to make moves to go get your quarterback. But the Dolphins here will get the franchise quarterback. You have to take risks, and in this case, I agree. Tua has a higher. I think he has a higher ceiling than Burrow, but he is also more of a risk. But I think it's very smart for Miami to pull this trigger here. Um, with Brady leaving New England and heading to Tampa Bay, I think there's an opening for the top team in the AFC East. I think Buffalo is obviously miles ahead of anyone else, but I think if the Dolphins have a good draft, that they can slowly work their way up, and I think Tua is going to help start with that. I do think Josh Rosen needs to get a chance. I could see them trading him for this point probably like a fourth round pick tops from like a team like the Patriots. Honestly, I don't know. Teams don't really like trading in division, but could happen. Number 4 is the first shocker of the draft that I have with the New York Giants. I have them not going Isaiah Simmons or an offensive lineman. I have them going CeeDee Lamb, the wide receiver from Oklahoma, which this is way higher than I've seen him on any other mock drafts. And I know this is like a really deep wide receiver class, but I just think I'm really high on CeeDee Lamb. I think he's miles above anyone else. By far, my number 1 receiver on the board. And I think that you have young quarterback Daniel Jones, you got running back Saquon Barkley, even then they got Sterling Shepard, Evan Ingram. Their offensive line could use some work, but I want to do some things that were a little not obvious because that is what happens in real life. And I think CeeDee Lamb adding to that young team would be a nightmare for opposing defenses because you can only stop so many people. Like I said, I am really high on Isaiah Simmons, but I see him slipping to like a little bit later, not like super late, just a few picks. Still probably be like top 7. I don't see him falling past that. But here I have them getting CeeDee Lamb, which would be super exciting to watch. I think CeeDee Lamb is just such a good playmaker, and it would be unstoppable for that offense. And I think that is also a division that's up for grabs. I'm not very high on the Cowboys. The Eagles have injury concerns. I don't really know where they're at. And then the Redskins were pretty bad last year, but who knows? So I think the Giants could make some moves and maybe compete for a playoff spot next year. Next, I have from the trade from Miami, the Detroit Lions get pick 5, and I have them getting Jeff Okudah, cornerback from Ohio State. So being able to trade back and acquire draft capital and still get like the top cornerback on the board at number 5 is incredibly lucky for them. That's just how this draft's going to work out. I don't see them missing out on Okudah. I heard reports that that's who they're high on, and if that's who they want, then they have all the opportunities to be able to get him. I think Okudah is a great player and debatably the best cornerback prospect we have seen in a very long time. The Lions team isn't great now, but adding Okudah as a cornerstone for your defense can help very well in the long run of things. The defense is shaping up very nicely under Matt Patricia. They've made some big moves signing former Patriots, Jamie Collins, Trey Flowers. I think they have a very solid team. Probably not to compete for the division in the next few years because I think Green Bay is way above anyone else. The Vikings dropped off. The Bears are big question marks, so I don't really know where they're going to be at. But I think this is a great pick. For the longest time, Okudah was looked at as the number 1 cornerback by far, but then I've seen some reports saying that C.J. Henderson from Florida is, which I don't personally agree with, but a lot of things could happen, but I think Okudah is going to be the pick here. Next up, we had 6. We have the LA Chargers, which I think this is 100% going to be locked in if he's available. Which I have Justin Herbert is how I pronounce it, or Herbert, however you want to. I don't know the exact pronunciation of it, but the quarterback from Oregon. I don't at all believe Tyrod Taylor is going to be a bad quarterback, but I don't think he's a long-term answer either. So why not draft like kind of a project quarterback and give him time to develop for the future? or if he outperforms like we've seen before, like in Carson Wentz type situation, he could start right away. Either way, I think you go quarterback here. I personally like Jordan Love a lot, but I don't think he's worthy of this high of a pick. They could trade down and try to get him instead, but I think they go Herbert here. Uh, I go Herbert here personally because I feel like he fits this system better. Possibly a risky pick, but in this league, if you don't have a quarterback, you can't really win, so you have to take those chances. I think the Chargers are a very confusing team. They have a lot of talent. They just don't seem to mesh well together. Philip Rivers, one of the better quarterbacks of my time of watching football, has really slowed down a lot in recent years. So I think maybe getting a younger quarterback in there can boost them up a little bit. And then here at number 7, I have the Carolina Panthers getting Isaiah Simmons. I have him listed as linebacker from Clemson. Like I said, I don't see him slipping that far, but I do have him slipping to 7 here, which is huge news for Carolina. I know I was saying how Simmons is debatably the best player in the draft and probably my favorite prospect personally, but I also don't know if the other teams feel the same way. He is just such a versatile player, and I feel like he could help fill the hole from Kuechly's retirement, which Luke Kuechly is one of those shocking retirements before 30 that just happen every year, it seems. That's going to be a huge hole to fill. I think it's going to take a while for the Panthers to get back to where they were a few years ago, but this is a good place to start. He can play literally every position on the defensive side of the ball, and I think it's shocking I even let him slide this far in the first place because I think he could go as high as 3, but here he is at 7. Next up at number 8, we have the Arizona Cardinals going Tristan Wirfs, offensive lineman, Iowa. This is the first, boring pick I have in the entire draft. Or probably the most exciting pick of an offensive lineman. He is a combine warrior who is super athletic. I don't know if any of you've watched the combine, but he was just an athletic monster in every category. He would be an awesome piece to help block for the franchise quarterback and reigning offensive player of the year, Kyler Murray. You're going to want to give him time to throw to his new all-pro wide receiver and DeAndre Hopkins. Still don't believe how they got that trade to go, as Bill O'Brien seems to be throwing away the entire Texans team. I don't really know. But I think that's a solid pickup here. He's my personal favorite offensive lineman. And with that being said, I think that improves their offense. I think they're a little lacking on the defensive side as well. They are a few pieces away. I don't see them making the playoffs this year, but they're getting towards that point, and I think this will be a good piece for that. At number 9, I have the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I have them going Jedrick Willis Jr., offensive lineman from Alabama. So I have 2 O-line picks in a row. So back-to-back linemen here. Jacksonville is kind of a weird situation. They had a whole lot of talent as they were in the AFC Championship game 3 years ago at this point. It just never seemed to click other than that 1 year. Now they've traded away pretty much everyone. They traded away Jalen Ramsey to the LA Rams. They just traded away Poirier to the Broncos. Calais Campbell to Baltimore. They're just getting rid of their entire team. I think they're starting to go through that rebuilding process, which is probably good at this point because they didn't seem to go anywhere with that aging talent. And it seems they have no direction. They would have loved to get a defensive player here, like if Isaiah Simmons would have slid or Okuda or something like that. But they get a good prize anyways. They seem to be going with Gardner Minshew as the long-term franchise quarterback, which I am kind of hesitant on. I think he's a solid quarterback, but I don't think he's anything special. I think it's going to be one of those situations where 2 years from now we're looking at them having a big hole at quarterback. No offense to him, but I just don't see him fitting well in that situation. But in this scenario, I know that's what they're going to be doing, so why not block for him if that's what you're going to be doing in the first place? At number 10, I have the Cleveland Browns, and I have them getting a very solid player in Derek Brown, the defensive tackle from Auburn. Not not a lot to talk about here. I think the Browns are a good coach away from being a playoff contender. They don't have many holes to fill. So I say go best player available and get Derek Brown out of Auburn. A solid player and one of the safest players in the draft could help boost them to the next level. They have a ton of talent. I thought it was a terrible hire from getting Freddie Kitchens last year, and I think I proved to be right. As with all that talent, they weren't even close to a playoff spot. They weren't the worst. They definitely improved from years past, but they were definitely not performing up to where they should be. Derek Brown would be a huge pickup for them, and I think that would help them out a very good deal. Number 11, here we have the New York Jets, and I have them going with Jerry Jeudy, the wide receiver from Alabama. So my receiver number 2 on my big board, going here at number 11 to the Jets. I think that I could very easily see the Jets trade down and try to fill more holes. But from where they are, I could very much see them take a great weapon for Sam Darnold to throw to. I can also see the Las Vegas Raiders jumping out to pick him as well, but in this scenario, they miss out. Um, the Jets just lost out on Robbie Anderson, who just signed with Carolina. And I think Jerry Jeudy is a really good receiver as well, and I think they need to help out Sam Darnold. He is obviously going to be their franchise quarterback and has showed promise of doing so, but they're going to need to add some weapons as he doesn't really have many targets. Quincy Enunwa was pretty good a few years ago. Then there was injuries that happened, and now it seems like they have nobody. So drafting the number 2 and probably better receiver than the top receiver like the past 5 drafts, it's a good pickup for them. At number 12, I have the Las Vegas Raiders. Excuse me if I butcher the name. K'Lavon Chaisson, the edge from LSU. The Raiders have a knack for trading away all of their superstar talent and saying it's hard to find that position. Khalil Mack. But Chasen would be a good pickup for Gruden. I really like the Raiders roster, and I feel like they could really compete for a playoff spot next season. They just really need to improve their pass rush and secondary, to be honest, and I think this is a good pickup for them, and this could very well push them over the edge to a playoff contender. Next up at 13, we have the San Francisco 49ers, the Super Bowl runner-up of last year from their pick from trading DeForest Buckner to the Indianapolis Colts. And I have them replacing Buckner with another good defensive tackle in Javon Kinlaw, the DT from South Carolina. This is a great position for San Francisco. They are one of the best teams depth-wise because they have a lot of young talent that hasn't asked for much money yet, so they still have a few more years of a Super Bowl window. And they just traded Buckner for this pick, so why not replace him with a young talent? Kinlaw could slot right in and get experience without having to be completely relied on and be like the top dog at the position, which is a good place for him to be in, personally. I really like this fit, and I think it could help keep them in the running for a very long time, even though at this point, I know it's super early, but I see Kansas City repeating as they have 20 of 22 starters from last year, and Pat Mahomes is, Pat Mahomes. Next up, 14, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers just newly added Tom Brady, as most people know, the GOAT. I don't have them helping him out on the offensive side of the ball with this pick, but I have them getting AJ Epineza, the edge from Iowa. The Bucs are in a great position. They have a pretty good pick and, the GOAT at quarterback. Even though he slowed down a little bit, he had a little rough season last year, but whenever you have Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, that'll probably help out quite a bit. The Bucs have an offense, but they need a defense to go along with it, and an edge player would help them here. Epineza seems to be a player that could go way higher than projected, but also way lower than projected. He's kind of one of those players that it's very hard to predict where he's going to go. I've seen some people have him like number 2 edge, and I've had some people list him as like 6, 5, 7, around that range. He's probably the most unpredictable player to mock that I've seen. And then, so moving on from that, we have pick number 15, which is going to be the Denver Broncos. I have them getting Mekhi Becton, the offensive lineman from Louisville. I think the Broncos need to find a way to move on from Garrett Bowles. I know he's kind of young, and he was their first round pick not too long ago, but he is straight up just not good. I haven't watched a ton of Broncos games from this season, but I did watch the Broncos Bears matchup. And he was atrocious. I know he was going up against the Bears have a really good front seven, and that's not the easiest task, but he basically single handedly lost in the game with all the penalties. And this is also the best player available, so that fills the need. I think he had more holding calls than anybody. He had like at least four in that game alone, and uh, it's just time to cut losses and move on from him, in my opinion. Number 16, I have another mock trade. Atlanta will be trading their pick to the New England Patriots for, you guessed it, Jordan Love, quarterback from Utah State. I know if you're losing Brady and their slated starting quarterback is going to be Jarrett Stidham, yeah, I would try to find something else in the draft early on. No offense to him, but that's not a good position to be in because I think the Patriots still have a lot of talent on the roster, and losing the quarterback is a big hit. But if they find someone who can fit into that, I think they won't lose a step. So I have the Patriots making a blockbuster trade to move up and get their guy. Nothing against Stidham, but there is no way a team that still has a roster to compete can have him going into the season as a starter and still being a playoff team. I think if he had like learned behind Brady for a few more years, we could see him as like a Garoppolo Brissett type, but he didn't really have that opportunity. I really like Love as a prospect, even though I believe that the Patrick Mahomes comparisons are a little insane. I think Mahomes is in his league of his own, and there's no one who's even close to him. But I would love to see Belichick coach Love. I think he could coach him into a really solid prospect. Obviously, I don't know for sure if that'll happen, but I know I didn't post my mock last year on YouTube, but I did post it on Twitter. And I had at number 9, I had the Bills getting DK Metcalf, which I would have loved to see happen with Josh Allen and that arm throwing to a big receiver like that. This is kind of like the same situation where this is like the pick I want to happen more than anything else. I would love to see Jordan Love in New England. Um, and moving on from that, we have 17. We have the Dallas Cowboys. We have them getting Xavier McKinney, the safety from Alabama. The Cowboys are an interesting team to debate. They don't seem to have many holes, but they also don't perform as well as they should. I personally am not high on Dak. I don't think he's a Super Bowl caliber quarterback. But in this mock, I have him doing the predicted thing of sticking with him anyways, which is obviously what's going to happen. I think he is a solid starter, but I don't think he's anything too special. I say their offense is good enough. They could go offensive lineman to help replace the sudden retirement of Travis Frederick. But instead, I have them going with more of a flashy pick of a big time safety. I think he could plug in and play right away, quite the playmaker, and could be a great value at pick 17. They also signed Clinton Dix, and I think having them two start could definitely bolster that secondary, which has been lacking. And it would be a huge pickup for Dallas to hopefully keep them in the playoff hunt. At 18, it's going to be the Miami Dolphins once again with their trade from Pittsburgh for the Minkah Fitzpatrick trade. And I have them going wide receiver, which is going to be Henry Ruggs III, the wide receiver from Alabama, so it's my number 3 receiver on the board. I had Miami picking Tua earlier after trading up, but still not having to give up any of the 3 first rounders, which is huge because it was only 2 picks. Also, this makes it a little more exciting of a mock, to be honest. So I just kept them keeping all 3 first round picks. And because of this, they get my wide receiver 3 at a decent spot. While I don't think he is nearly as high in potential as the top 2 receivers, I think he's a solid and very pro-ready, insanely fast, and just a yak monster. I think it was average every 4 catches ended up being a touchdown at his career in Alabama. And with Tua expected to start, I don't see him being benched for Ryan Fitzpatrick if he does end up there. It would be ideal to give him a solid wide out to start his career with. And then, so moving on from that, we have 19. We have the Las Vegas Raiders. Sorry. The Las Vegas Raiders from their trade from Chicago, which is still from the Khalil Mack trade from a few years back. I have them going with C.J. Henderson. The cornerback from Florida, which I talked about earlier, has some people have him as their number one. I don't personally see that. I think that may be kind of a smokescreen. I still do think he's a solid prospect, and the Raiders getting him at 19 would be huge. While they miss out on a big time receiver, like if they would have, I think both times I had the receiver going the pick before them. I feel like there are plenty of solid options later on since this is a great group of receivers. Like he goes probably like 15 deep that would start on most teams. But they fill another huge hole at cornerback, and they get a solid one at that. While he isn't as good as Akuda, in my opinion, I feel like he is a lot closer than most believe, and he just seems like a Raider kind of pick. I know it's kind of hard to describe, but in my mind, it makes sense. They missed heavily on cornerback in the first in recent memory, but they have to get it right eventually, right? I mean, you had Garyon Conley from Ohio State, didn't work out. DJ Hayden from Houston, his was more of injury concerns or injury problems than anything, but they're going to have to improve cornerback at some point because that's where they're very much lacking. At 20, it's the Jacksonville Jaguars from the Jalen Ramsey trade. And I have them getting Patrick Queen, the linebacker from LSU, as this is obviously there's a lot of LSU players going early as they had a great season. I mentioned earlier that I believe that they would want to go for a defensive piece with the earlier pick, but they polished up the O-line instead. But they get a stud at linebacker here as well. I could see a team like Baltimore trading out for him. I've heard him linked to them a lot of times from multiple different sources. But in this scenario, I had the Jaguars staying put and picking him instead. I think he would be a great fill-in for that defense. They could go for bigger needs than linebacker, but he is a good prospect, and he's probably one of the best players on the board still. 21, I have the Philadelphia Eagles going. Again, I may butcher this name. I'm not into college as much as pros, so there's a little lack of knowledge here. But Yetur Gross-Matos is an edge from Penn State. I wasn't really sure where to go with this pick. I could very much see them trading down. They do need secondary help as well, more than anything, but I don't think there's anyone worthy of going this high just yet. But why not get a solid pass rusher off the edge? Derek Barnett hasn't been the worst, but he hasn't lived up to 14th overall pick he was. There's not a lot of holes on this Eagles team, and I think this could be a good, solid prospect to just fill in right away. And as well as their defensive line is aging. Fletcher Cox getting up there in age. Brandon Graham. I think they could definitely use a younger piece there. At 22, it's the Minnesota Vikings from Buffalo, which this fun Diggs trade just happened about like a week ago. And I have them getting Andrew Thomas, offensive lineman from Georgia, which I've seen him go as high as 8 in mock drafts, but I have him sliding quite a bit. I'm not as high on him as most people are. I think Thomas is very much a victim of situation here. He is a solid offensive lineman. He shouldn't fall this far, but the Vikings aren't going to be complaining. They protect, Captain Kirk, quarterback, who isn't as bad as some people believe. I think he's very much hated on. Yes, he doesn't perform on Monday Night Football for whatever reason it is, but I think he is a solid starter. And they can definitely win with him. And I think protecting him as that Vikings offensive line is one of the worst in the league. And I think this will definitely bolster that. At 23, Atlanta Falcons mock trade they got from New England. I have them getting Kenneth Murray, the linebacker from Oklahoma. Trading down was huge. They pick up some draft capital. Excuse me. They pick up some draft capital, and they get a solid replacement for the departing Devondre Campbell. The Falcons are going to shock the world next year, in my opinion. I could see Gurley returning to MVP form and matching him with Matty Ice and Julio. Not to mention Calvin Ridley, I think can make this offense absolutely horrifying for any defense. Like this is definitely going to be like a top two offense in the league, in my opinion. So give them a boost on defense and watch them climb back into the playoff picture as I see them competing for the division, no doubt. They are a very, very good team and highly underrated and slept on. At 24, the New Orleans Saints is another bit of a shocker here. I have them going running back with Jonathan Taylor from Wisconsin, who I am super high on Jonathan Taylor. Um, Talent-wise, I have him as my number one, but just personally, my number one draft crush, other than Isaiah Simmons, is J.K. Dobbins, but I'll get to that later. I have them getting Jonathan Taylor here. I know this may seem like a shocker, but I think it's a huge sleeper pick. The Saints seem to be at their best when they had that one-two punch of Kamara and Ingram. So why not get the best running back in the class to pair along with Kamara? I would love this pick, and I think it is a solid pro-ready player to help them get to the Super Bowl as their window is closing. Because I think once Breeze retires, it's kind of just shut for a little bit until they get another franchise quarterback, and I don't think Taysom Hill is that whatsoever. Um, and I think they need to get pro-ready players now so they can still compete while that window is open. As I say, next year, maybe the year after that is all they have left. 25, the Minnesota Vikings. I have them going receiver with T. Higgins from Clemson. With the abrupt departure of the disgruntled Stephon Diggs, why not get a replacement? T. Higgins out of Clemson. He's a solid route runner and he has solid hands. He could step in and help pretty well, as I think, even though with Diggs and Thielen, they were like a top wide receiver duo. Without Diggs, their number two, I don't think is anywhere on par, and I think they do need to go receiver at some point early on in this draft. I could also see them trading down and getting a different receiver if they prefer someone else, like maybe a Justin Jefferson or someone like that. The receivers are very hard to mock because, again, it's one of those positions where everyone's just mixed and matched. It's just kind of a personal preference. But I see this as the ideal situation for them. With the pick, the Vikings would be leaving day one with one of the best days of any of the teams. Getting two huge pieces of their offense with their already stout defense. I think that can help them compete for a playoff spot once again, even though they have debatably the toughest division in football. 26, the Miami Dolphins from Houston in the Laramie Tunsil trade. I have them with another shocker and going with J.K. Dobbins, who I mentioned earlier, the running back from Ohio State. He's, like I said, another shocker pick, but a great one as well. While Taylor is known as being the best back in the class, Dobbins is going to be my favorite. My old high school actually played Dobbins in the playoffs a few years back and got destroyed by him. I don't remember the exact stats, but I just know it was bad. Getting Tua, Ruggs, and Dobbins all in the same round would be huge and could set up this offense for years to come and would be very exciting to watch. I think if you get a quarterback, running back, and wide receiver trio all in the first round of this draft, I think Miami walks away very happy from this. And I'm not saying they compete this year or anything like that, but I think they could definitely have a young, talented offense that could help out a lot. 27, Seattle Seahawks. I have them going the very predictable pick of offensive lineman with Josh Jones from Houston. The Seahawks absolutely need to go to offensive lineman here. Watching them in Week 17 against San Francisco and the playoff game against Philly and Green Bay, it was not good to watch. They absolutely need to protect Russell Wilson better. I think Wilson is a top 3 quarterback. I'd probably have him talent-wise number 2 behind Mahomes. And he performs well given the situation that he's in. But imagine if he had longer than 2 seconds to throw every play. I think that the Seahawks could be a lot scarier than they are. Russell Wilson has to kind of make a lot of plays happen on his own. And if he had time to throw, I think the Seahawks would look a lot better. And this is a solid pick for them to do that. I don't see them going any other position whatsoever than offensive line, as that is definitely their biggest need. 28, we have the Baltimore Ravens going Grant Delpit, safety from LSU, who I'm really high on him as well. This isn't the biggest need for the Ravens right now, but it is a good pick nonetheless. They really recently cut Tony Jefferson, and Delpit is a similar player in play style-wise. So why not get a younger version to come in and plug and play right away across from Earl Thomas? He could help them not lose a step and debatably even improve the secondary right away. And I think they could be an even better team next year. I know that's a lot to ask from a rookie, but I am, like I said, very high on him, and I think he could plug in and play. And I personally think he's the best safety on the board, uh, and I think that helps him out tremendously. 29, we have the Tennessee Titans. I have them going Christian Fulton, cornerback from LSU, so back-to-back LSU secondary players, DBU. I like this pick as the Titans have an aging secondary. Malcolm Butler is in his 30s now, and they're looking like they're going to lose Logan Ryan, who, as of recording this, still hasn't signed anywhere. Don't really know what's going on with that. Uh, so why not help out Mike Vrabel and improve the secondary and help it get younger and make another deep playoff run next year with the exciting young team? I love this offense. Tannehill is a very good game management quarterback. Just give the ball to Derrick Henry, and then they have Corey Davis, AJ Brown, uh, Jonnu Smith. They have a ton of weapons for Tannehill to use, so why not improve that defense? Which honestly, it's hard to stop the Chiefs' offense anyways, but I think it could have helped last year if their defense was a little bit better. At number 30, the Green Bay Packers going Ross Blacklock, defensive lineman from TCU. This is kind of difficult pick as well. If I'm Green Bay, I'm probably looking to trade away this pick for a good solid veteran, kind of like how a few years ago the Patriots traded their first round pick for why is my mind blanking out? The wide receiver. Uh, my mind is hardcore blanking out right now. But the wide receiver who is now on the Texans, I cannot think of his name for the life of me. Because I think the Packers are one of the best teams talent wise in the entire league. I think they kind of overperformed last year, but maybe it wasn't a fluke. They do have a lot of talent, and their window is closing pretty rapidly with Rodgers getting up there in age. So again, getting another pro-ready player and trying to make another Super Bowl run. I do see the Packers competing, obviously, for their division. I think it'll be Green Bay 1, Chicago 2, Minnesota 3, and then Detroit 4. So they do have a chance to make the Super Bowl, obviously, with winning the division and making a playoff spot. Number 31, the San Francisco 49ers are back on the board, and I have them going cornerback with Trayvon Diggs from Alabama. The 49ers could legit go in any direction here. A big toss-up where they can go. They have such a good team, not a lot of holes. I think they go best player available. But so why don't I go to the heir to Richard Sherman as he's getting up there in age, getting another cornerback to learn behind him. I could very much see them trading down as well, getting some more draft capital or something like that. But if they do stay and get Diggs, I think that's a very good pick as well. And lastly, of the picks, I have 32 Kansas City Chiefs getting Kyle Duggar, the safety from Lenoir-Rhyne, which is a small school draft pick, but whenever you're a team that's in the later rounds, you have a good opportunity to make gamble picks like that, as they don't really need anyone to play right away. The Chiefs have got good opportunity to take a project player with a high ceiling, and I think that's the description of him. They don't have many holes, so they get a prospect who could end up becoming very, very good. Not a lot of tape that I've seen on him. He's not a prospect that I've watched on game days, obviously. I've watched a little bit. But what I have seen, I've been pretty impressed by him. I could very easily see the Chiefs repeating as champions, like I said earlier, and I could see this prospect play not like, a super important role in that, but I could see him playing a very quality role. And with that, I'm only doing one round, and that'll be the entire first round of this. If you have any comments or anything, just let me know in the comments below. And that'll be all from me. Deuces.